Incredible things happen when you have a group of committed people who are all on the same page on what the mission is that you're trying to accomplish together. And that's when they really become a team and you really start to see the gains become bigger than the sum of the parts.
Hey, Soul Sisters. Welcome back to the Hey, Soul Sister podcast. We're really excited for today's conversation.
Yes, because we're diving into something so many of you are navigating right now: how to build a team while building your vision and what it really takes to step into leadership without burning out.
Because there comes a point where you can't do it all alone anymore. And that shift from doing everything to actually leading, it changes everything.
And not just building a team, but building one that actually supports your energy, your growth, and your life.
So today we're talking purpose-led leadership, aligned teams, and creating a culture that lasts.
And we're joined by the incredible AJ Tibando, entrepreneur, leader, CEO of Shift Canada, and founder of company where she scaled from an idea to a $250 million national organization.
AJ, we're so excited to have you here. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I think it's been almost exactly a year since I was on last, which is
That's crazy.
That is
yeah,
crazy. What?
I can't believe that. I was thinking
yeah,
that last night in bed. I was like,
yeah.
wait, AJ started with us. And it feels like a full circle moment, you know?
Yeah. Just let's pause and appreciate you guys for a second because that means you've been podcasting for a year, which I'm going to totally make the statistic up, but I imagine puts you in like the top 20% of people who start and continue podcasts. Because as
Correct.
someone who has
Yeah.
started a podcast, did 10 episodes and was like, yeah, I've got other stuff to do. It's not
Absolutely.
easy.
Yeah.
And
I
so,
think okay, so we had you on the podcast a year
Mhm.
ago. And since then we've had a lot of new listeners come in. So I think what we'd love to do is just give them a bit of a background of your story and your journey, AJ. So how did you get to this point?
my story is one of like trying, failing, learning, and continuing. I'd say that's just been the cycle of life that I've gone through again and again and again. So, as you said in my bio, I've been an entrepreneur. I am an entrepreneur. I've started two organizations. I'm now a CEO of an organization I didn't start, but is still relatively new and sort of the founding CEO, you could say, of it, which is a lot of fun. I really love building and the process of taking an idea from that kind of fuzzy thing floating above you in the sky into something real. And I've had the opportunity to do that a number of times in a bunch of different ways. So, my first organization was a for profit social enterprise. We had visions to scale it to be huge. And what we ended up with was a really wonderful small consulting firm that found a market, but grew to be the size of the market, which was not huge, but was a lot of fun. And I learned so much through that experience. And then the next organization that I built was the one you referenced, which was a nonprofit, but I had a vision of growing it, at a growth rate that was similar to like a tech startup where you kind of have that hockey stick growth and scale. And I wanted to prove that you could do that in an impact driven nonprofit organization and kind of flip the idea of needing to get venture backed capital and all these different things on its head as requirements to growth. And so that one we ended up growing into, as you described, raising $250 million and scaling it across the country. And that was a really amazing experience because it not only gave me the opportunity to do one of the things that I love, which is taking that vision and turning it into reality, but it also gave me the opportunity to build and lead a team and build a culture. That is something that I'm super passionate about. Ever since I was young, I've felt like a leader, whether I was actually in charge of things or not. I was always the kid in a group project that everyone else was like, "Okay, no, you go talk. You go, go be in charge." And I was always really comfortable with that. I was always sort of the team captain when I played sports. And so I always had this desire to lead people and in a way that was really authentic and natural. And so growing that last organization, we grew to be about 70 plus people and built a culture from the ground up. And so that was an incredible experience. And now I'm back, the charity that I'm running and building. I'm an army of one right now, which is really interesting to kind of go from those different perspectives, but seeing how I can grow and lead people. And this time, I don't think we'll ever grow the organization from an employee headcount to be anywhere close to what we've done in the past. But now it's about leading an ecosystem and, thought leadership and influencing other people to behave and inspiring them in different ways. I'm kind of harnessing the power of a community to move in a different direction, which is a different kind of leadership. So it's been, a journey of a lot of different kinds of ways of exploring my strengths and my weaknesses as a leader and learning how to lead in all different kinds of positions, whether it's one of actual authority or one of influence.
There's such a big difference between, I will say, corporate leadership versus purpose-led leadership. And, from having experience in the corporate world, I've been able to see both. And with you, AJ, and like as I was saying earlier, I'm like, you are literally the queen when it comes to being able to take a vision and being able to take that vision down, ground it, and bringing on the right people, building the right team, but also like infusing it with a culture that really lasts and helps to amplify and grow that vision. And you've been you're such a powerful example of purpose-led leadership versus corporate leadership. And so I think right now there's a lot of our listeners who are female entrepreneurs, and they're very much like amplifying their impact. They're growing their business. And some of them may also be at that point where they're thinking about, well, how do I take my vision? How do I take, my impact and then scale that and grow a team? And I think some of the biggest fears that come up for a lot of women entrepreneurs is the fear of like letting go of maybe like that control, like handing that over. You build up this baby and now you're handing it over to somebody else to help you grow it. I think there's a lot of fears of like letting go, delegating, trusting that someone else can kind of like hold your vision too. So it's like, there's on one hand, there's like those barriers, but on the other hand, we also see that in order for you to continue to grow, you really do need a team. Like you mentioned that as you were explaining how you built that past national organization and scale that to like 70 plus people. So if we were to look at that from the lens of, being a doer to transitioning into a leader where you're actually building a team and you're trusting your team to help build that vision, what identity shift did you have to make to go from builder to leader?
It's such a good question. And it really is an identity shift. I think that's a great way of framing it right off the bat, that you need to evolve yourself. As your organization grows, you need to grow and evolve as an individual in terms of what it is that you're feeding the organization. I think that a couple things come to mind with that. As someone who has, had that baby and had it so close, and you really do have to find that way to trust others to take care of it as well. I think the first thing is doing whatever work you might need to do if you need to do it to try to separate your ego from your organization, because you are ushering an idea into the world, but that idea is not you. And that's a really important thing to get to at some point, because it can be so powerful to be deeply connected emotionally to your idea in those early stages, because that's what it takes to bring it to life. Like you are literally birthing something from nothing. So like a mother bringing a baby into the world, it is a part of you. But at a certain point, you can smother it, right? If you don't figure out how to recognize that it is actually its own person. And as it grows, it will evolve in ways that you might not have expected. And your job isn't to micromanage and control what it becomes. It is to guide it into the universe, into its reality. And you have to be sort of open to how it might evolve in ways that you didn't foresee. And so what's really important is to get really clear on what is important about this idea, what makes this idea unique or specific, or, what are those boundaries, right? And then be open to the how, Because as you bring other people into your idea and into your work and you ask them to do things, they will have different ideas about how to do things. And that's really valuable because you do not have a monopoly on good ideas, right? There's the reason you're bringing people into this is not just to, um, be like your monkey at a typewriter, doubling your typing speed. It's to bring other perspectives, other approaches, see things you aren't seeing because you're so focused on this component of it. And so, really taking a moment to do the work of separating your sense of self from the success of your idea is an important step to then be able to bring people into it in a way that gives them the space to really contribute. And so, when I was beginning to scale my organization, I really spent time thinking about like, what does success in 5 years, what do I want this thing to look? What is that vision of, state, but growth look like? What are key values or, approaches, principles about how I want to get there that I don't want to compromise on, that are, that's part of the DNA of what makes this vision. Really getting clear on the mission, the why, some of the non-negotiables when it comes to the how at a principle level. That is then a roadmap that you can give new employees and new team members to follow. Um, on how to get to that outcome. And so everyone, I would spend so much time, and you know this, Whitley, and for those who are listening who don't know, Whitley was actually an employee of mine um, at this previous organization. And this is where our relationship comes from. And I'm going to turn it back on you to ask you what you experienced in my leadership that was valuable, because I think that's also where some of the most powerful lessons can come from. But as you know, I spent a lot of time I didn't tell you guys exactly what to do, but I spent so much time constantly repeating, like, here's why we're doing this. Here's what the mission is. Here's what success looks like. Here's, get everyone super clear on what we're trying to accomplish together. Get them super clear on what my expectations of success from you as an individual look like, that I want you to take risks, that I know that you're going to make mistakes, that when you make those mistakes, I expect you to be honest about it and talk to me and we'll work through them together. And, but just constantly over communicating what success at an organizational and employee level looked like, and then backing off and letting people do their thing and making sure there's check-ins so I can keep tabs on things and course correct and nudge where needed. But it's really incredible things happen when you have a group of committed people who are all on the same page on what the mission is that you're trying to accomplish together. And that's when they really become a team and you really start to see the gains become bigger than the sum of the parts.
I love that. So, so, so good. I have one quick question because something's beaming up right now. And that is for any of the women who are listening, who are maybe building more of a personal brand or a more personal driven type of business where it's like coaching or consulting, that sort of thing. How do you take something that's so personalized and then amplify that vision to build a team?
Yeah. So one of the pieces of advice that I got early on when I was becoming an entrepreneur was that, at the beginning, you're doing everything, right? And as you're doing everything, you start to identify what are the jobs. I've got, 10 different jobs that I'm doing every day. Of those 10 jobs, what's the first one that I can give to someone else? What's one job that I don't need to do, that I am not uniquely there? There's not something specific about me uniquely doing this job that someone else couldn't do. That's why most people's first hires are bookkeepers or accountants or, money people, because that's an easy thing to get someone else to do. And it's a huge time suck when you're trying to create a vision, right? And so if your brand is really entirely kind of around you and you as an individual, like that can be a challenging thing in the beginning to figure out how to give away. And so don't start with hiring someone to do something that you really only feel like right now you can do, right? Hire someone to do the things that are easy to give away. Maybe that is your marketing back end work, right? So your voice is still going to be the main thing. And maybe even your creative design or your creative ideas when it comes to how you market might be something you want to hold on to because that feels really personal. But having someone who can help you figure out how to do your ad buys or how to post, like building your social cadences or whatever that might be, someone to do PR for you so you can get out there more, but it's really selling your vision, your work, your identity. Like, what are those jobs that you can easily give away? And start with that. And then it's that almost is like training wheels for delegating and bringing other people into your work, because that will give you the experience and begin to develop the muscle of relying on other people to do things for you. And then as you do that, you start to get comfortable with, you start to build a team, right? And you start to get comfortable with having other people in your vision, and they're in the safe parts, right, of your vision. And then over time, as you keep growing, it's like, if you think about, you're like a mountain emerging and you're growing up, like there are more layers that will start to show themselves as, what, this is not something that I uniquely am the only person that can be doing now. Maybe you get to a point where you've done so much coaching, that you could write down your model of what makes your coaching unique. And then you could bring on someone who you train on your model of coaching, do some of that coaching or do secondary coach. Maybe there's, like, but as you keep growing, as you build those layers underneath you, that pushes you up. And as you push up, you see new layers emerge, and those new layers can be jobs that you give away.
Yeah, I can totally relate to what you're saying. I think what you've been saying is like, first of all, you got to let go of the ego. You've got to let
Mhm.
go of the attachment, the control, and micromanaging everything. And as women, we tend to want to control everything. We want to micromanage in our personal life, in our business, right? And especially for me as a creative, because I know that my vision is my vision alone. And so it's hard to convey my vision to somebody that I want to do what I want. Like, I want to bring it to life. How do I convey that vision to them? And if I do give up that control, does that eliminate a part of me as a creator? So what is your take on that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has to find the space that they're comfortable in. Like, it,
Mm.
there's the saying, if you want to, oh, what is it? It's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others.
Mhm.
Something like, I might be butchering that, but
No, you totally got it.
yeah, but
Good.
there's no requirement for you to bring other
Yeah.
people into your vision,
Yeah.
right? So like, if
Yeah.
you're like, you know what, I don't want to share this. I don't trust anyone. Like, you can pursue that path, and that's not a
But it might be
not a
slower, is
path
what
to
you're saying.
failure, but it's
Yeah.
definitely a path to slower, and it's a path to
Yeah.
smaller.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
but maybe like, this is your business, this is your idea. You decide what you want it to look like. If success looks like, you know what, this is entirely mine and I only need to earn or have this many clients, and like that's a nice, tidy, happy business for me, like, have at
Mhm.
it. Yeah,
Comfortable,
yeah,
right?
there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that if that is
Mhm.
what feels good to you.
Mm.
So, I think that's,
Okay.
and so we talk about like, what does success look like 5 years from now? Like, know that, because maybe it doesn't look like having any staff. Maybe it doesn't look like having a team.
Right.
We are a kind of growth oriented society, and usually when you're starting a business, you want to grow it. And so we make a lot of assumptions about that, but like, take the time to gut check
Mhm. Mhm.
what you want this thing to be for you, because it is going to take up all of your time. Even if as you grow, it only takes up more time, counterintuitively. And so
Yeah.
take the time to think about that.
How do you know when it's time to hire versus push through?
I think if you feel like you are losing business opportunities because your
Mm.
capacity is not
Right.
keeping up with your growth, that's like beyond any other kind of, sort of emotional or like stress or burnout or anything like that. If you have more business
Mhm.
coming in than you have capacity to work with, like, that's your sign, right? And that's your sign, because that means that if you hire someone, you can easily increase your revenue, because the revenue's there for the taking. You just
Mhm.
can't snatch it because you don't have enough hands. So, um,
And what about, like, if
yeah.
you're juggling like multiple things simultaneously, but they all like you have the vision to grow all of
Mhm.
those things. What would you do in that case? A lot of women are growing and they're working on multiple things maybe at one time. So, like, I guess, how do you know when you're beyond capacity?
I mean, I think your body will usually be the one to tell
Mm.
you when you've you've moved beyond capacity, like in a really serious way. When you say doing multiple things, are you talking about juggling like a side hustle and a main business and a family? Or are you talking about like a business that has multiple prongs to it, like podcast, marketing agency, and Substack,
Mhm.
and, all these different things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Is
I
that
think
more
that
of it?
What's
yeah,
the
yeah,
internal ecosystem? Like
Yeah, yeah, you're
what you
building
have to do?
no, you're building like a
yeah.
multi product business.
Mhm.
So, I think that so here's what I did when I was, my last organization, we had this big vision, right? Of being this, high growth, $100 million a year, like massive organization. That vision existed when it was me and another person writing ideas down on napkins, right? Like
Mm,
it was a big vision from the beginning. In order to get there, there was going to have to be a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different components to the organization to achieve that. But when you are trying to focus on too many things at once and you're trying to build, it's really hard to get anywhere, right? It's
mhm,
really hard to see progress in any one thing. And so a great thing to do is to pull yourself back. You have this vision that doesn't have to go anywhere, but put it aside for a second and say, what is the first thing that I need to prove I can do in
mm,
order to get to the next step of that vision? And so this organization, it was all about building training programs to help get people jobs. And we had this vision of like funding other organizations across the country to run these programs and do this thing and do that, all this, create a whole new ecosystem of training and whole new approach and all this stuff. But before I could do any of that, I had to prove that I could get one person a job through a
mhm,
training.
mhm,
If I couldn't do that,
mm,
nothing else mattered, right?
mhm,
And so I put all of that other vision aside and said, I need to focus everything I have, because I only have so much attention and so much capacity, on proving that I can do this one thing, because this is the foundational building block of everything else in my vision. And so that was for a year and a half. We had to go find funding. We had to go build out a model that was aligned with our hypothesis around how we were going to get these people jobs. We had to build the program. We had to bring people into it. It took over a year to go from, okay, I got to figure out how to do this, to figuring out how to do this and proving that I could do it. And then once we could prove that we could get, one cohort of people jobs through this model, the next thing we had to prove was not that we could do it at scale. It was that we could do it again. Right. And so, okay, now prove you can do it twice. Prove you can repeat it. And then once we repeated it, we had to prove that we could give this approach to someone else and then they could do it, right? And so it's like, great that I have this huge end state vision. It's important to have that. It's important to write it down. It's important to like embody and envision it. But then you kind of have to put it in a box on a shelf and say, like, you're there, I'm coming for you, but I can't focus on trying to get to you today. I have to figure out how I take those first few steps down the path to get to you eventually. And you have to get to a place where you have proven all of the things you need to prove to, what I would describe as, have permission to open that box, right? Get to a place where you have accomplished the things that you're trying to accomplish, that you're like, yeah, now it's time to scale this. Now it's
mhm,
time to go big. And so I think that is, you can have this idea of this multi-pronged, like busy, do all the things. I see 100 problems. I want to solve all of them. And you can, but you can't start there. What's the one problem you need to prove
mm,
you can solve for people today, and then you can solve again for them tomorrow, and then you can solve for a new group of people the week after that, right? And prove that you can do that. And then what does that give you the space to unlock next, and then grow from there? Because I mean, if you were given, if some angel investor were to come to you and give you a ton of money and give you opportunities to do other things, maybe you could do more than that at once. But
mm,
you gotta do the work, right? You gotta prove that your idea can move forward. And so, and the thing about that is that it feels like, oh, but I'm going to lose time on all these other things, right? I'm going to lose opportunity on all these other things. But what you're actually going to see is a huge amount of progress against one major tentpole component of that work. And when you then move from that piece, that you actually get so much satisfaction because you're like, all right, we fucking did it. Like, good. Okay. Like, I can prove this. Now what's next? All the other things start to get easier, right? They start to move faster. They build on that foundation. You're not starting from, you're not trying to start three things from scratch. You're starting, you've built one thing and now you're building on top of that thing.
I have a
Sherry, like,
question. I'm boiling.
I know,
I'm
right?
like,
Me too. I'm like,
I'm like
Sherry, I
I'm
wonder what's
writing
going
stuff
through her right
down and
now.
I'm like, yeah, I need to ask her a question. Okay. So I feel like you have not only embodied that business side of yourself, like you've done the things, you've hit the goals, like obviously 250 million is no peanuts, and many of us women are sitting in the comfortable, right? But there comes a point, and I feel like a lot of times it hits you, you're like, you know what, I want more, but I need to embody that version of me in the spiritual sense, right? So what kind of work did you do? Because you came from a small firm organization that you built, then you went into a bigger one and you've grown over time. Was there something that, or things that you did to put you in that state? And how did you handle, all the hard work, rejection, different types of personalities, and being a leader? You've got to handle a lot of other people in that organization that don't see the things that you see. And you've got to handle a lot too. And it's not just doing the work, it's a lot of emotional stuff too. And it's your body's picking up all that energy. So, how do you handle all of that?
Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 whole conversations in
Right?
that one question, 100%. So, like the answer is like not always well, first of all, right? I think, you can see me now at the end state of something. And I talk about this all the time that like when you're at the beginning of something, your energy and your aura and your vibe is very different than when you're at the end state of something. And I think the best thing you can do for yourself is recognize that when you see someone like me right now on this podcast at the phase of my career that I'm at, with the accomplishments that I'm at, like, don't compare your confidence to my confidence because like I was not this, I wasn't this confident 5 years ago, 7 years ago when I was starting out. I was looking at people in this seat talking the way I'm talking now, being like, how the hell did they do this? And who are these people? Right. So just, you do yourself no favors by looking at someone who has been in the game for 10 or 15 years when you have for a year or two and saying, like, I wish I was more like that. Like, it's just, you'll get there, but you get there through the work. Yeah. So I was a lot of versions of myself before I got to the one I am today. One of the things, like, I had co-founders in everything that I've done so far. I've always had a co-founder, different co-founders, and there's been good sides and bad sides to those experiences. But I would say that in both cases, in both of my organizations, one of the unique things that the co-founders brought to the table that was actually really helpful in pushing me was a level of confidence that I would say almost bordered on like arrogance of what we could accomplish. And it was this level of like ambition and determination that I came before I was an entrepreneur. I worked in politics, right? I was a political staffer. I was in government. I was not exposed to this world, and I was very much exposed to the world of like reasonable policy rationales. Like, we're going to commit to something only if we know exactly how we're going to accomplish it. Right. And then coming into this world of being like, yeah, we're going to build this into $100 million business. And it's like, okay, but like, I don't see how we're going to do that. I don't like, we're sitting here drawing on napkins. Like, I don't get it, guys, and they were like, no, we're going to do it. Right. And so, like, honestly, it wasn't an internal thing in the beginning that came out that pushed me to believe that these things were possible. I was kind of dragged, to a certain degree. And, and it was just like, all right, well, like, okay, I guess, sure. And I believed in their delusion before I believed in my own, right? And
I
so
like
and I
that
think
though, because
yeah,
everybody, they talk about um, the people that you spend the most time with is going to have the most impact on
yes.
your overall life, right? And so, like, what you're describing is literally that you weren't able to hold the delusion, but you're like, all right, I'll buy into your delusion. But over time, you were able to
Yeah.
expand your own level of belief and your own level of
But it sounds like
delusion
you were
too.
changing your identity at the same time. Like,
I
it sounds as
was.
if you were
Yeah.
stepping into a different version of you that you had no idea how to, like, deal with at that point. You're like, "Who is this girl?" Like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yes, I was stepping out of my comfort zone, which was
Yeah.
wildly and insanely uncomfortable. And,
Mm,
there was something about being just so spun in my identity and like so out of my depth of who I am and what I'm doing that it was almost like performance. Like I was almost like I am going to perform the role of
Fake it till
this
you make it.
extremely confident $100 million vision entrepreneur.
Oh my
I'm
god.
not that
Yeah.
person, but I'm gonna put that hat on. I remember when I was starting out, so this is over a decade ago. I remember reading this thing about Beyonce and how when she was starting out, like she would always have stage fright. And it was really hard for her to get on stage. And she got over it by creating an alter ego for herself. Right. And so when
Mhm.
she would get on stage, she would embody this totally different person. And I
Sasha
think
Fierce.
actually, sorry?
Sasha Fierce.
Sasha Fierce. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right? And I actually that was I think it was a couple of weeks into this journey of becoming an entrepreneur when I read about that and I was like that's what I have to do. I have to create my
Wow.
own, I didn't create an actual persona, but like this idea of I need to see this as something separate from me that I
Mhm.
am performing and it sounds really inauthentic and I can imagine that there might be people being like, I don't want to be someone who I'm not. And I get that. And I'm not really saying you have to like you don't have to change your value system. You don't have to like it's not about that. It's just about like you do have to shed these
Like
old versions
confidence.
of yourself. Yeah. And
Uh-huh.
you have to it's like fake it till you make it.
Mhm.
And so you have to find that way, like, to become a
Mhm.
confident person. And so sometimes performing as a confident person before you feel that level of confidence is how you get there. And so like I said, I was, it's absolutely, who you surround yourself with. So to anyone listening, it doesn't have to be a co-founder. It can be a network, it can be a community, but go find like the craziest person in the room with a dream that seems insane to you and go become their best friend
Mm.
because that is the level. If you really want to go way beyond what you think is possible, like you got to go to someone who you think is crazy because that's what you're trying to get to, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was how it was. And then the more you know, action creates reality, right? And so the more
Yeah.
that I got up and talked about this stuff, the more the path started to reveal itself. I think that's the other thing that I've really learned is that when it comes to building something, you don't know how it's all going to turn out and you can't sort of stand on the sidelines and think your way through it until you see that realistic path. We had this big, $100 million vision
Mhm.
Mhm.
and I wasn't going to be able to stand back and think my way into how
Mhm.
that becomes non-delusional, right? I was going to
Yeah.
have to start walking down the path. And then the more you do, the more things start opening up for you. And you're like, oh, actually, if
Right.
we were to go down this path and then take these steps,
Yeah.
that would get us a lot closer to making this a reality, right? And then you just start to see that it's actually real and you believe it and you start to embody it. And over time you realize you're not performing. This is just who you've become.
Mm.
Mm.
That's so powerful. I love first of all, love that you use, like, the alter ego, like,
Yeah, Whitley
example that you
talks
were
about this
sharing.
all the time on the podcast. She has Myra.
Yeah, my
Oh,
alter
yeah?
ego, yes. I'm like,
Love that.
Myra comes out
it's
to
like
play every now and then.
Gotta have the alter ego. Like,
yeah,
you
it
really
works.
but I
Yeah.
think this is also going back to what I was saying about when you're bringing people in, separating your ego. from
Mhm.
your
Right.
organization, right? Like all these things like play with it, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be so intense and heavy and tight, like create space for you as a person and then
Mhm.
a different version of you as a person. And then, your organization as this whole other identity. I think the other thing that I'll just add to that is I'm not a particularly ego driven person. I'm not a particularly ego driven person. When I am motivated to do something that scares me, it's usually as an act of service to something else. And that doesn't mean like do gooding, but it's like I have to, like, I was always much more motivated to go, make a big pitch for something, not because I thought it would make me look good, but because it would support the team, right? Or the team
Mhm.
needed me to do that. So, one of the things that I found really powerful to help me also get over some of the discomfort was to make it less about me. This
Mm.
organization isn't me. It is this other thing. My job is
Right.
to bring this thing into the universe, right? My
Mhm.
job
Mhm.
is to be the vehicle through which this idea enters reality and thrives. And so when I'm going to do something that I'm super uncomfortable about, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it in service of this idea that I really believe in, that I have taken on the responsibility of shepherding into the world. And that can be a really powerful framing to get over yourself and your discomfort and your everything else. And if it doesn't work out, it also becomes easier to get back up and try again because it's like, look, this idea is relying on me to get up and go do this again. And it's not about me, it's about it. And this is my
Mhm.
job.
I love that. That actually is I was saying this to Sherry just like the other day actually, and I said to her, I was like, when it comes to building, when her and I are building together, it's like it's easy. I can go out and I can do the thing, can do the hard things. Even when I was working with the organization that we were talking about, I had to be front facing. I had to go out and, deal
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
rejection every day possibly, right? But I was okay with it because it was like I think it's so much easier for us to go out and do the hard things when we're representing something outside of ourselves. But the moment that we have to
Mhm.
show up and we're
Mhm.
representing ourselves personally, it's like where all the judgments, the insecurities, the self-doubt, the fears all come to the surface, and it makes it so hard for us to move forward and just take the action. And I
Yeah.
was telling Sherry about this. I was like, "Girl, I don't know understand why, like, sometimes I even hold myself back personally because it's like, oh, okay, I'm making it about me." So I love
Mhm.
that reframe that you talk about,
Mhm.
AJ, in terms of stop making it about you. Make it about
Mhm.
the service, the impact, the value that you're bringing out into the world that's going to actually have an impact on other people versus making it about you and your insecurities and your doubts and everything because we all got them.
So
Like, no matter
true.
what level you're at, we all have them, right? And so I think that one subtle shift, reframe is really powerful. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
you like if you're motivated to help people, you're going to be motivated by this concept of doing something in service of that as opposed to doing it for yourself. And I think that particularly women, we can get very like, oh, it's not about me, it's about whatever. And it's like, okay, you can hold space for that mindset and that approach because it's not about you. Like think about how you would show up for your kids, right? If they needed something, right? It
Mhm.
probably differently than you might show up for yourself because you're like, this isn't about me. I got to take care of, support, whatever, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of the same idea.
I think there's like such a fine line with your purpose and and also doing something that you love because I think all our purposes in life are to serve. We are all here on
Mhm,
earth to do something good, to have an
mhm,
impact in some way. It could be the smallest thing. And for me in all my businesses has been impact driven, like service. And the reward in the end is the happiness that I give others or the product or whatever, right? The service. What they get rewards me. There's a fine line because I feel like sometimes people give so much of themselves to one thing and then it starts to feel like a job. Like, okay,
mm,
so you're building this business and it's getting bigger and bigger and you're holding it at the capacity you can hold it at. Until what point does it start to feel like a job and burning you out? And what do you do in those situations if you feel like, all right, I started this with my why and my intention and everything that flowed through me and my soul, and
mhm.
now I'm just feeling a little disconnected. How do I get back to myself? Are there moments in your life, struggles in your life that have taught you how to go back to that center?
So the analogy that I use especially in the early days, is when we kind of grew really fast and then leveled out for a little bit and then grew really fast again. And in those first growth spurt, when it was just a handful of us and, um, things were happening really quickly, the analogy that I would give to the team, because I remember people would be like, when's it going to stop? I'm like, bro, never. Like, that's like the point is to keep growing. We were a growth oriented organization. Like, that's the game you've entered into here. But burnout is not sustainable. And I don't believe in grind culture. And so how do you balance these things? Right. And so you have to continually evolve yourself and your business to keep up with what it's becoming, because every time it grows, it becomes a new business or a new type of thing. And you need to constantly rethink in those early days, particularly as you're going from very small to a little bit bigger. That's actually one of the harder phases,
Mm.
is that first early stage of growth, because you're really
Yeah.
going from I'm one person doing everything or two people doing everything to I'm five people doing everything or eight people doing everything, and figuring how to evolve that is really challenging. And then as you grow, it's still challenge. It's just a different kind of challenge. But um, you know, I would always describe to the team that, like, when you think about a growing business, think about it and how the work fits. Think
Mm.
about a toddler and a pair of pants, and how fast every time you buy your kid that new pair of pants, right? You got maybe 6 months if you're lucky. And then they outgrow them and all of a sudden they're too short. And then you got to go find that new pair of pants. And, you get another 6 months and then they're too short. And, we are the toddler and our business processes are pants. And
I
every
love
six
that.
months, we got to rethink how we do stuff so it fits how fast we're growing.
Yeah.
And
Ooh,
you
that's
can't
good.
stretch these pants. You're
That'd
going
be
to
good.
rip holes in them, right?
Yeah.
And you're always going to be like, your ankles are always going to be a little bit cold, because you're not going to realize that you need new pants until, they're too short. But that is what is happening. And so
Mhm.
Yeah.
that is what we are experiencing. We are
Mhm.
experiencing growth pains and cold ankles, and we need to identify when the pants are too short and we need to get new ones. And so that is a way to think about when you're growing, how you avoid burnout. Burnout usually happens when you deny the fact that you need pants. I feel like I got to let this metaphor go because it's
That's
but
such a good one.
It's so good.
right? It's like that is when, you start to burn out, when you're just trying to stretch this closeout to cover
Yeah.
you and it doesn't fit anymore. And sometimes those business processes, sometimes it's technology you might be using. Maybe you need to level up on what your tech stack is to streamline and automate more stuff. Maybe it's that you need to start giving away jobs by hiring new people into the business to take on stuff that you don't need to do. What those things will look like will be unique every time you hit those growth spurts. But
Mhm.
those are the moments that you have to just face that head on and realize, like, oh, we're at a point where we need to change clothes and figure out what this next version is going to look like.
Sherry, I have a revelation.
What's your revelation?
We need new
New
pants.
pants.
We need new pants.
Oh, there's so many women out there listening, just like looking at their ankles
I
right now, being like, shit, this is it.
Yes.
That was such a good analogy. I'm like, I'm gonna think about that every time. But my
Yeah.
kids also grow out of their pants, and I'm like, I'm so lazy to go take them, and they're wearing they're wearing
We
ankle
all
weights.
are, right? Yeah, 100%. Like, no one wants to spend money on new pants for a 4-year-old because, right? And so you're like, how long can I not do this for, right? But like,
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
it's not good for you just got to do it,
yeah.
And
So
and
yeah,
so.
so that's a good segue. People that are saying, "Well, I'm gonna waste money
Mhm.
by hiring.
Mhm.
What do I do?" I mean, I feel like it comes down to like, okay, are you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
It'd be like, okay, are you not believing that your business is gonna grow at this
Mhm.
point? Because
Like, what are the underlying
yeah,
things maybe?
Yeah, because
Yeah,
like you said
so
earlier, being comfortable, right? And
Mhm.
like I was always comfortable in my previous jobs where I did everything myself. I never scaled higher than I was. But I think with Whitley and I doing what we're doing now, we've got the marketing agency, we've got the podcast, we're going
mhm,
global. We
mhm.
need help. So,
Hell yeah.
for women that are like scaling now and they're like, you know what? I need help, but I'm
Mhm.
afraid to dish out the dough, the moolah.
100%, 100%. You work so hard for every one of those dollars, and then you're like, "I gotta give it to somebody else."
Right.
Like, I'm just finally starting to keep some of it for myself, you
Mhm.
know? So I get that. A couple things. So first of all, like I said, get really clear on what success looks like. So I think,
Mhm.
we're only talking to women who have, recognized that success for them is a high growth scaling company. And so that's great. So if that's your goal, understand what it takes to build a company like that. You're not the first people to scale a company. You're not the first people to go global. There are whole aisles of books and shelves and stories and pods about what it takes to grow a business. And all of them will say that it takes investment, right? You
Mhm.
cannot grow if you don't invest back into your
Mhm. Mhm.
business to support that growth. You're feeding it, right? You
Mhm.
can't grow something if you don't feed it. And so you have to feed your business if you want it to grow.
Mhm.
And that's every business, even businesses that, most high growth companies, particularly if you're looking at tech, they take on external investment and that's how they grow themselves. They invest more than they're even making into growing quickly. You definitely do not have to do that to grow. But even bootstrapped companies that do it without external investment, they do it by funneling their revenue and their profits back
Mhm.
into their growth.
Mhm.
And the more that you do that up front and the faster you start to do that, the higher your growth becomes. And so a couple of ways that you can think about it is first of all, understanding, put numbers to it. Investment and growth is a math problem. It's a math challenge. So think about it in math terms.
Mhm.
How much how much money do you need at a bare minimum to take home in order to sustain yourself, right? And like keep yourself alive and make sure that you can meet that. And then everything on top of that becomes money that you can put back into your business.
Mhm.
And you can decide how long you want to keep yourself at this level and at what point when we grow by this much, how much of that percentage am I going to start to take back into my own life to help me grow and feel like I'm benefiting from the growth of this business. So you can think about all of these things from a numbers perspective. You can also look at it as experiments. These don't need to be
Right.
massive forever
Correct.
choices. These tests are experiments, and every experiment has a hypothesis. Like, what are you trying to prove through this experiment? What are you trying to learn that
Mm.
you don't know right now that you're trying
Mhm.
to validate is true? One of the most helpful ways that I was taught about startups when I was first starting out was to see a startup not so much as a small business, but as an experiment. And the
Mhm.
goal of a startup was not necessarily to hit certain revenue targets right away, but was to learn, was to test things and learn and prove that you had a market, prove that you had. So that this idea of setting goals as learning can be a really valuable way to create the space that you need to say, okay, I'm not committing to having a forever third person on my team. I'm going to spend 6 months. I want to learn if bringing on someone with this skill set and this background and this knowledge base to do this piece of work will help me grow by this amount or this
Mhm.
range of the amount.
Mhm.
Okay.
And so I'm going to hire a freelance person or a contractor, whatever it is, for a 6-month contract, lay out the requirements, put aside X amount of dollars to do that, invest this in my business, and I'm investing in this experiment to see if I can get this outcome
Yeah.
and then go run the test.
Love
I
that.
love
And
that.
and then if the test works, like it becomes a no-brainer, like, hell yeah, I'm gonna invest more in this because this is working, right? And if it
Yeah.
doesn't work, you end the experiment, you end the contract, and you figure out what the next test needs to be. But you
Mhm.
learned something. No matter what happened, you did not waste money because you
Mhm.
learned something.
Right.
So
Mhm.
maybe you didn't make money that you wanted to make, but you learned what not to do. And in a business, learning what not to do is just as valuable as learning what to do. And the faster you can learn what not to do, the more quickly you can figure out what to do.
What
So
to do. Yeah.
no
Mhm.
matter what the outcome of that experiment will be, You will learn something you didn't know before about how to move your business forward, and you will have given yourself an out to get out of that situation.
Okay.
That makes it safe to try.
This is incredible information, by the way,
Mhm.
AJ. Like, I hope all y'all soul sisters are taking notes today. I know I am on my little notebook
Yeah.
here. But I want to say this to you, AJ.
Good
Like,
book.
love
I
that.
feel like I just got a window into Sherry's brain with that
My
How
notebook.
are
brain
how
works
are
like
you?
this. Yeah.
Right? I'm like, girl,
Let me see your book. Let me see your
this
book.
is mine.
This
I'm neat. This is mine.
Oh my God. Wow. That's how
Yeah.
different we are, but we
Yeah.
complement each other. It's
There you
Yeah.
go.
But AJ, I want to go back to what you had shared because I think it was such a like powerful way that you described entrepreneurship and growing a business. So like when you're growing a business, not only are you growing yourself, you have to grow, you have to evolve, you have to embody the version of yourself at that level that you're stepping into. But while you're doing that, your business is also growing. Instead of treating it as you are the business, it's like treating it as separate, but you're moving with it. So it's like your business is its own entity and it is growing and it's evolving. And every time it grows and evolves, it's also going to require you to also grow and evolve with it and expand your
Mhm.
leadership. So my question is, when you get to the point where you're hiring people, how do you get your people to also grow and evolve with the business?
Yeah.
This comes back to the conversation about leadership that we were having at the beginning of you do need to evolve as a person and as a leader at every stage of the development.
Mhm.
And the first thing that you need to evolve from is being that doer, right? Where
Mhm.
I do everything to being a delegator and a guide. And a manager. And then as you evolve from that, you what you ultimately get to is um it's almost like a shepherd. You know the path that you need to get to, and you're kind of like keeping the flock together, and pulling
Mhm.
people in when they're getting losing their way. I think that if you're doing things right, it becomes somewhat natural, like that you start to feel that you need to show up differently, and you'll sense friction in how you're working with people that's going to tell
Mhm.
you that you need to adapt. And I think that that's something, really listening to people, really figuring out how to talk less and listen more. That's a big step in leadership when you move from doing everything to working with other people, is that you really need to give them space to share what they know, what they're thinking, what they're worried about, and listen to that. And if you're really actively listening, you can start to pick up what it is that they're asking you to do and how they're
Mhm.
asking you to show up. And so I think that's really important. I think humility, like leading with confidence and humility, and there's actually two sides of the same coin in my opinion. They don't conflict with each other.
Mhm.
But showing up with humility about the fact that you might need to evolve or that you might need to change your approach depending on how the organization is changing is really important. But I think the number one thing as a leader that no matter what stage you're at, people need from you is just clear, constant communication. Constantly, don't ever assume that people know what you want them to do. Don't ever assume people understand the mission the way you understand it. You are going to know. And this is one of the hard things when you go from this being your baby that you birth, that you know better inside and out than anyone else, and you bring someone else in and then they're doing something differently. And you're like, oh, that's not how you do it. And it's like, it's not like how, first of all, how could they know how you want it to do it? Right.
Right.
Mhm.
Second of all, be open to other ways of doing things. Right.
Mhm.
But that communication component, I think, is the number one job of any leader, is to make sure people understand what they're supposed to do, like what the mission is, what success looks like, um, what the expectations of behavior generally are, how they can show up for the organization, like how they can embody the
Mhm.
organization. And the more you can just get people to really understand that in their bones, the easier it becomes to trust that they know what they're doing, the easier it becomes for them to know how to make decisions. Your job becomes easier because they understand how to problem solve in a way that is aligned with how you would solve problems. because they understand the ethos of what you're doing. And it becomes easier for them to really embody that culture and build that culture for your organization because everyone gets what the mission is. Sometimes there will be people that you might bring on who it's like, no matter what you do, there's friction there, there's a disconnect. And you have to be prepared that not everybody is the right fit for your mission, right? And so that's something else that I think as you grow, that first person that you bring on, might not be the right fit. And again, that's why you start with experiments.
I really feel like you cracked the code when it comes to hiring the right people because I watched you take a team, bring on a team of people who were so passion driven, so like purpose driven and believed in the mission, myself included. And there was like, I think at that time when I joined the organization, there were maybe around 20 of us at that time. Everybody just seemed so genuine, authentic, good energy, and just like we all connected. It was like one big family. And I will still like I'll never forget the time when we first did our first company retreat, and at that point we had so many employees all across Canada, and we all finally got to like meet in person for the very first time. And I'll never forget like the way that I felt. It was like I was being reunited with family. It was just like everyone felt like family. It felt like home. It felt so comfortable. And the other thing too was I remember when you were speaking one morning to the organization and the way that you spoke, everybody was just so locked in. Everybody was so connected. Everybody was so connected to the vision and the mission. And I just remember everybody leaving that company retreat, going back to work, so inspired, so like ignited and fueled up. And that culture like really carried on for a very long time. And even to this day, like there's so many of us that are friends. There's so many of us that still come together. And I can imagine like if you were to be like, hey, I'm starting a new company and I want all you guys to come with me, everybody would fucking follow you because
Jerry Maguire.
type of leader that you are. And it's not like cult like leadership. Like, it might sound like it, but
Sounds
it's
like a
not.
cult.
It's not. It's like very much like,
Big cult energy. That's the trick.
because I feel like there is something to the essence of what you do when you are hiring people, AJ, because you can hire anybody, but you're not going to get that same type of culture. So there's two things. What are you looking for when you hire somebody to bring on to your vision? And how do you grow that culture to be so impactful?
There's a couple of things. One, to be clear, there were lots of folks that came on at different points that didn't necessarily fit that culture. And part of building a culture is figuring out how to weed out some people, bring in more people, and create a critical mass of the right kind of energy and the right kind of approach in the room. I think that, again, just being really authentic, like I really always tried to just show up as myself and just be really transparent, really honest, communicate openly, really not put up walls between me and the team because that's just the kind of person I wanted to be when I was at work. I think that really helped to translate to create this comfort and this connection and this like authenticity within the group. And I think what's incredible though is that, I didn't actually hire you. I didn't actually hire a lot of the people you're talking about. Like, I think I probably was like one of the final, like, yeah, okay, she seems great. Let's go. But like, it was what was very cool to me was that after we got to about 10 people, I didn't do most of the hiring. It was other people who were doing hiring. But when you can build a really strong culture and everybody understands, again, the why, like, why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? How are we trying to go about doing it? You can attract really good people to your work because they resonate with the job description or the message or the organization. So, we really attracted mission-driven, purpose-driven people who were looking to do things differently because that was the vibe that we put out about what we were doing. And then, again, when everybody is clear on what you're trying to accomplish and how you want to go about accomplishing it, um, it makes it easier to see, okay, these people are aligned with that, and these people aren't necessarily aligned with that. And that's how you can sort of select in to the organization. Um, yeah, the amazing thing about the culture and any culture is that, and the risk if you don't take the time to build it right from the beginning is that it becomes self-perpetuating. It's, it becomes much bigger than yourself very quickly, and other people then become the ambassadors and the recruiters into it.
This is amazing. Thank you so, so much for all of this. And I
Yeah.
feel like it helped me and Sherry too a lot. Like, I think her and I have been also like kind of discussing, like, is it time to hire somebody? Is it time to kind of like expand a bit? So I think like there's a lot of really powerful things that you shared throughout the conversation. We're like, I think we're both were like ding, 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 ding.
I think we're both like at the stage of building big now,
Mhm.
where we've always been doing it solo and it's always felt smaller. But I think the two is better than one, right? And then
Oh,
add
it's better
more
than 2.
people. Why not?
That's it. But yeah, and don't think about it, is it time to hire? It's like, is it time to experiment?
Yeah, and experiment with one at a
Mhm.
time, see how that goes, and
And again, it's focus,
yeah,
right? Think that, what is that one piece of my
one piece.
business
Yeah,
that I want to learn something about?
yeah,
And what is it that I wanna learn, and how can I
yeah,
run an
yeah,
experiment to learn that?
yeah, and release control, like
Mm.
release the need to control everything. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
totally.
like that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. This
Yeah.
was wonderful. Thanks for having me on.
And if anybody wants to connect, is there anything there that you want us to share?
Yeah, you can just reach out on LinkedIn. I'm the only AJ Tibando on LinkedIn. There's not a lot of us in the world, so you can find me there, and yeah, hit me up, DM me. I'm happy to chat all the
Slide into
time.
my DMs.
Slide into my DMs. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. All right, soul sister, let us know if you took away anything from this episode that you want to share. We'd love to hear from you and leave us a review and follow us for more. So see you next week. Bye.